My name is Hannah Brooks. I'm 39 years old, and I've spent most of my adult life building quiet stability, working as a logistics coordinator for a small firm in Portland, Oregon. I'm not rich, not remarkable, but I'm the kind of person who pays every bill early and finds comfort in predictability. Which is why, on a drizzly Tuesday morning, I never expected a single phone call to split my world in two. It was 10:17 a.m. I remember because I just poured a second cup of coffee and was staring out my kitchen window at the rain dripping from the balcony railing. My phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number, area code 5112, somewhere in Texas. I almost ignored it, but something in me hesitated, that instinct you get when the universe is about to whisper something you can't unhear. "Hello?" I said. A woman's voice, brisk and professional. "Good morning, Miss Brooks. This is Sandra from Silver Oak Mortgage Servicing. I'm calling regarding the delinquent balance on your property at 412 Lavender Drive." For a second, I thought she dialed the wrong number. "I'm sorry," I laughed. "You've got the wrong person. I don't own any property." There was a pause, the faint clack of a keyboard on the other end. "We have your social security number ending in 9487, correct?" My smile froze. "Yes," I said slowly. "And your date of birth, June 14th, 1986. The coffee in my hand turned cold. "That's right," I whispered. "Then, Miss Brooks, this account belongs to you. The current past due balance is $11,420 on a total loan of $523,000. Our records indicate multiple notices mailed to your address." I gripped the edge of my kitchen counter. There's been some mistake. I rent an apartment. I've never bought a house, certainly not in Texas." The woman's tone softened, the way people speak to someone on the verge of panic. "You may want to contact our fraud department, ma'am. The property is registered under your name." When the line went dead, I stood in my kitchen, phone still against my ear, heart pounding so loud it drowned out the rain. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the mug. I pulled up my laptop, logged into my credit report, and there it was, in black and white, a 30-year mortgage from Silver Oak Bank, originated 18 months earlier. Monthly payments listed under my name, missed installments, warnings, a foreclosure notice pending. I stared at it for a long time, trying to breathe around the rising tightness in my chest. I checked the property details. 412 Lavender Drive, Austin, Texas. A 5-bedroom house with a landscaped lawn and a bright blue door. I had never set foot in Texas in my life. That's when something icy slid down my spine. A crawling certainty that this wasn't some random hacker or distant criminal. Someone who knew me had done this. Someone who had my full name, my address, my social security number. Someone who knew I trusted too easily. I tried to reason it away. Maybe it was a clerical error, maybe a cruel coincidence. But as I reread the document, seeing my signature, my handwriting, or at least something that looked like it, my body went numb. I remember pacing in small circles, whispering, "No, no, no," like saying it enough times could undo it. But the truth was already there, blinking on my screen. My credit score had plummeted. I had missed my payments for nearly half a year. And now, a bank in Texas was preparing to take legal action against me for defaulting on a loan I'd never agreed to. The next hour blurred. I called the bank back, demanded verification, begged for answers. The woman transferred me to another department. Another voice confirmed the same information. My signature, my name, my details, all legitimate in their system. I felt like I was losing oxygen, like the world was tilting at a strange angle only I could feel. In that moment, my life split cleanly in two. Before the call and after the call. Before the call, I was Hannah Brooks. Dependable. Ordinary. A woman who believed that being good and careful kept chaos at bay. After the call, I was a woman staring at a debt I didn't owe, a name I didn't recognize tied to a house I didn't buy, and a future unraveling by the minute. What haunted me most wasn't the money. It was the precision. Whoever had done this knew exactly what to do. They had my documents, my history, my trust, and a quiet voice in the back of my mind whispered something I didn't want to believe. What if it wasn't a stranger at all? That night, I barely slept. Every sound from the street made me flinch. I replayed the conversation in my head until the words blurred together. By 3 a.m., I was still sitting at my kitchen table, staring at the printed report, the address repeating like a curse. 412 Lavender Drive, Austin, Texas. I didn't know who lived there. I didn't know how my name had become tangled in their walls and mortgage and payments. But I knew one thing for sure. Someone had built a life out of my identity. And I was about to find out who. Sit back, relax, and stay with me until the very end of the story. If you enjoy real stories that twist, shock, and make you think about what family, trust, and resilience truly mean, please subscribe to the channel. Your support helps me keep bringing more stories like this to life. Before you go, here's a question for you to answer in the comments. If you received a call saying someone had taken out a $500,000 mortgage in your name, what would you do first? A. Call your family to see if anyone knows anything. B. Contact the bank and file an identity theft report immediately. Type A or B in the comments below. I'm curious to see what your instinct would be. The next morning, I woke up with that same dull ache in my chest, the kind that sits heavy even after a night of restless half-sleep. The call from Silver Oak kept replaying in my mind, each word sharper than before. The only thing that made sense was to call my father. He had always been the person who handled complicated things, taxes, paperwork, financial questions. Dad knew the system. He knew how to fix things. But that morning, when I dialed his number, something in my gut twisted, like I already knew I wasn't calling for help. I was calling for confirmation. He answered on the third ring, his voice rough with sleep and irritation. Hannah, what's wrong? I told him everything. About the mortgage, the Texas property, the forged signature. I expected shock. I expected outrage. But instead, I got silence. A long, heavy silence that made my heart beat so hard it hurt. Finally, he sighed. Don't overreact, he said flatly. Don't overreact? I repeated, barely able to process his tone. Dad, someone took out a $500,000 mortgage in my name. Another pause. Then his voice dropped, calmer but colder. You weren't supposed to find out like this. My stomach dropped. What do you mean I wasn't supposed to find out? You know about this. In the background, I heard another voice, faint but familiar. My brother, Evan. Laughing about something, completely unaware, or maybe too aware of what I was hearing. I stepped back, pressing my palm to my forehead. Please tell me you didn't do this. He didn't answer right away. Then, in a tone that was both defensive and resigned, he said, We used an old power of attorney, from years ago. It was just to help get Evan started, Hannah. He needed a place. You weren't using your credit, and it was just easier. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. You what? It's not like you lost anything, he continued, as if explaining a minor inconvenience. The payments were being made. It was temporary. Temporary? My voice shook. You forged my name, took out a 6-figure loan, and bought a house. That's not temporary. That's criminal. He sounded tired, even annoyed. You're making this sound worse than it is. I hung up before I could hear another word. My hands trembled so badly I could barely hold the phone. I paced my small apartment, trying to absorb the reality of what I'd just heard. My parents, my own parents, had used my identity to buy a house for my brother. An hour later, I called my mother. She answered on the second ring, her voice bright like nothing was wrong. Sweetheart, I was just thinking about you. How are you? Mom, did you and Dad take out a mortgage in my name? Silence. Then, a faint sigh. Honey, please don't make this a big deal. Evan needed help. You've always been the responsible one. You know how hard things have been for him. Mom, you stole my identity. Her voice softened into that familiar maternal plea. We didn't steal anything. We just borrowed your good credit. Families help each other. You're not losing anything, Hannah. We were paying for it. But you stopped paying, I said, my voice cracking. That's why the bank called. It's in default. She hesitated. Well, your father was going to take care of it, but things got tight after your aunt's medical bills. Mom, I interrupted, my voice rising. You could have asked me. You could have told me. You lied. You forged my name. Her tone changed, brittle now. We did what we had to do for your brother. You're fine, Hannah. You've always been fine. Don't punish us for trying to help him. That sentence cut deeper than I expected. Because it wasn't just about money, it was about the story my family had always told themselves. Evan was the fragile one, the dreamer, the one who needed saving. I was the strong one, the one who would understand. The one who could be taken from because I'd always find a way to rebuild. I hung up and sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the floor. There's a moment in every betrayal when the world stops making sense, not because of the act itself, but because of who did it. I would have believed this of strangers, maybe, but my parents, the people who taught me honesty, who told me never to sign something I didn't read, who raised me to be cautious, the absurdity of it made me laugh, the kind of hollow laugh that sounds more like a choke. Hours passed before I managed to log into my credit accounts again. There it was, all of it. The loan application, the attached power of attorney document, my fake signature scrawled at the bottom of the page. I zoomed in. It wasn't even a good imitation. They hadn't bothered to hide it well. I felt an odd detachment, like I was reading someone else's tragedy. The rational part of me started cataloging everything. Dates, amounts, document numbers. I opened a spreadsheet. If I couldn't undo the betrayal, at least I could track it. I needed facts, not feelings. But then, as I sat there typing, something inside me broke loose. I thought about birthdays, holidays, the dinners where my dad would toast to family, where my mom would beam at us like we were the picture of love and trust. All of it now tainted. By midnight, I was exhausted, hollow, but too angry to sleep. I drafted an email to the mortgage company asking for every document tied to my name. I requested an official fraud report. I started searching for lawyers who handled identity theft. And in the middle of it all, my phone buzzed again. A message from my father: "Stop making a scene. We'll handle it." That was the moment I realized they didn't think they'd done anything wrong. To them, it was still a family matter. That at a small inconvenience, I was blowing out of proportion. But to me, it was something else entirely. It was the day my parents stopped being my safety net and became the people I had to protect myself from. I didn't cry that night. I didn't even rage. I just sat quietly at my desk, staring at the glow of the screen, feeling the weight of 39 years of loyalty sliding off my shoulders. For the first time, I wasn't their daughter trying to keep peace. I was a woman with a stolen name, a ruined credit history, and the cold determination to get my life back without them. The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to reason. I was going to fight. In the weeks that followed, everything I thought I understood about stability began to collapse in slow motion. The kind of unraveling that doesn't announce itself with an explosion, but with quiet, daily humiliations. Emails from creditors, letters stamped urgent, and phone calls that started with "Miss Brooks, we've been trying to reach you." Every time I heard my name paired with a debt that wasn't mine, something inside me fractured a little more. It's strange how quickly your sense of safety can dissolve. Before all this, I used to take pride in how responsible I was. My credit had always been spotless. I had no debt except for my car, which I paid off 2 years early. I had savings. I had plans, small ones, modest ones, but mine. I'd been working toward buying a little condo near the river, a place with sunlight and quiet where I could plant herbs on the windowsill. It wasn't a dream of luxury, just a dream of ownership, of something that couldn't be taken from me. But now, when I logged into my credit report, the number glared at me in red: 5I-47. My perfect record, destroyed. The mortgage that wasn't mine sat like a scar across my financial life. I was receiving collection notices for late payments, statements of default, and even a letter from a law firm in Texas hinting at foreclosure proceedings. Every envelope felt like a small weapon. I'd open them and feel the air leave my body. When I told my boss at work that I needed a few days off to handle a personal matter, he nodded kindly. But the next week, I noticed the way he avoided eye contact, how HR started double-checking my file. It was as if the shame of what my parents had done had somehow transferred onto me. I could see it in their polite concern, their careful phrasing. "Hope everything works out, Hannah." At night, I'd lie awake and stare at the ceiling, counting every betrayal over and over. My parents had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. But what hurt the most was how little they seemed to understand the damage they'd done. My father kept insisting it was temporary. My mother left voicemails that swung between guilt and manipulation. "Don't destroy the family over this," she'd say, her voice soft and trembling, as if I were the one being cruel. I started avoiding their calls altogether. The silence between us grew thick, heavy. For the first time in my life, I felt orphaned by choice. I was both the victim and the judge, holding a quiet trial inside my head every night. I tried to stay functional. I made lists, steps to fix my credit, agencies to contact, legal resources to research. But the truth was, I was drowning. Every solution seemed to require something I no longer had: good credit, trust, emotional bandwidth. I cried once in the parking lot outside my office after a collections agent called me ma'am in a tone that was both pitying and suspicious. He didn't believe me when I said the debt wasn't mine. Why would he? On paper, it was. It's a particular kind of loneliness to be doubted about your own reality. People believe you, but only halfway, as if there must be something you're not telling them. Some part of the story you're leaving out. I started to isolate. I skipped dinners with friends. I ignored texts. Every time someone asked how I was doing, I said fine. So automatically it became muscle memory. But inside, I was unraveling. My apartment became a refuge and a prison all at once. I stopped cooking real meals. Some nights I'd eat cereal at midnight, sitting cross-legged on the kitchen floor, surrounded by unopened envelopes. The hardest part wasn't the financial mess. It was the identity shift. For most of my life, I'd been the responsible one. The daughter who never asked for money, who remembered birthdays, who paid her own way. Now I was the woman whose name was on a foreclosure list in another state. The humiliation felt bone deep, like a bruise that wouldn't fade. And yet, amid all of it, there was a strange kind of awakening. I started noticing patterns I'd ignored for years, little ways my family had conditioned me to keep quiet, to take on blame that wasn't mine. My mother's gentle guilt trips, my father's authority, Evan's constant rescue missions that always seemed to cost everyone else something. I'd been the glue holding them together, but glue breaks under enough pressure. One afternoon, about 3 weeks after the initial call, I sat in my car outside a grocery store and had what I can only describe as a moment of clarity. The kind that comes not from inspiration, but from exhaustion. I realized that if I kept waiting for them to fix it, they never would. They didn't see what they'd done as a crime. They saw it as family logistics. And I was done being the logistics. I went home, turned off my phone, and sat in front of my computer. For the first time since this began, I let myself feel the full weight of the anger. Not the screaming kind. This was colder, cleaner. The kind that sharpens you instead of shattering you. I opened a blank document and started writing everything down. Dates, names, calls, every conversation I'd had. The details poured out of me like confession. I didn't know what I would do with it yet, but I knew this was my evidence. My proof that I wasn't crazy. That night, I dreamt about a house I'd never seen, the house at 412 Lavender Drive. In the dream, I was standing on the front lawn, watching someone else open the door. My brother laughing, holding a drink, living his best life in a house that carried my name. When I woke, the anger had calcified into resolve. I decided to stop reacting and start acting. I started researching identity theft lawyers. I found government resources, hotline numbers, case studies. That's when I stumbled upon a name that would soon change everything. Lydia Chen, a Portland-based attorney who specialized in financial exploitation and elder fraud. But before I could call her, I did something small but symbolic. I shredded the old family Christmas card that had been sitting on my fridge for months, the one where all of them were smiling in front of a fireplace, the caption reading, "Family means everything." For years, I'd believed that. I'd lived by it. But that night, standing over my trash can as the paper fell in ribbons, I whispered something different under my breath. Family means nothing without respect. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight for the first time in weeks. It was still gray outside, still raining lightly, but the light found its way through the window and landed on the stack of papers on my desk. The credit reports, the mortgage documents, the mess of my life. And for the first time, they didn't look like evidence of my downfall. They looked like a roadmap out. I made myself a strong cup of coffee, sat down, and typed the first email to Lydia Chen. My voice was steady as I wrote. I wasn't begging for help anymore. I was initiating a battle. The spiral had taken everything from me, my trust, my peace, my sense of self. But somewhere in the middle of that chaos, I'd found the one thing my parents never expected me to have: the will to fight back. The first time I met Lydia Chen again after 15 years, it was raining the way it always does in Portland. Soft, steady, and persistent, like the city itself refuses to wash anything away too quickly. We'd gone to college together, shared dorm rooms and coffee-fueled nights, and then drifted apart as adulthood carved separate paths. She'd gone into law, I'd gone into logistics. The last time I saw her, she was still idealistic, scribbling case notes for mock trials. Now, when she walked into the cafe with her sleek briefcase and calm precision, she looked like someone who didn't just understand power. She wielded it. When she sat down across from me, I could barely get the words out. I told her everything: the mortgage, the forged documents, the calls, the disbelief. I told her about my parents' indifference, the way my mother's voice had cracked into that familiar guilt-laced plea, and how my father had told me to stop making a scene. I expected her to offer sympathy. Instead, she leaned back, eyes sharp, and said something I'll never forget. They picked the wrong daughter to mess with. It wasn't pity. It was conviction. That sentence sliced through the fog of helplessness I'd been drowning in. Lydia wasn't interested in comforting me. She was interested in winning. We spent hours going over the facts. She asked for every document I could find: loan numbers, emails, letters, anything that tied my name to that house in Austin. When I showed her the old power of attorney form my parents had used, she laughed in disbelief. This was signed when you were 19. For a student loan appeal. It's not even notarized correctly. She tapped her pen against the paper. This isn't just fraud, Hannah. This is forgery. The word hung in the air, heavy and real. For the first time, I saw what they'd done, not as a betrayal of trust, but as a crime. That night, I sat at my desk while Lydia drafted the first official steps: an identity theft report to the FTC, a certified letter to Silver Oak Mortgage Servicing, and a request to freeze my credit. She told me to make copies of everything: every form, every message, every shred of proof. Paper is power, she said. They used your signature to take control of your life. We'll use theirs to take it back. Over the next week, we became a small, relentless team. I'd wake early, before work, to print and organize documents. Lydia would call during her lunch break to update me on legal strategy. She filed a preliminary fraud alert with all 3 credit bureaus. She contacted a financial crimes investigator she knew from a previous case. She moved with surgical precision, cutting through bureaucracy like it was tissue paper. But beneath all the legal logistics, something deeper was happening to me. I was starting to wake up, not just from the shock of what had happened, but from years of conditioning. Every call from my mother that ended with "be understanding," every sigh from my father that said "don't overreact," every moment I'd swallowed anger because keeping the peace was easier, it all began to look different. I saw the pattern, the quiet erosion of boundaries that had led me here. I realized I had spent most of my life apologizing for existing responsibly, for being the one who didn't need saving. My family had taken that reliability and turned it into permission. Permission to take, to manipulate, to assume I'd forgive. One evening, Lydia and I met again to go over the next step: filing a notarized affidavit disavowing the mortgage. It felt surreal to sit in a notary office, signing my name, truly my name this time, under a statement that read, "I did not authorize or consent to the loan associated with 412 Lavender Drive." My hands didn't shake. Instead, I felt something close to calm. It was the first document in months that actually told the truth. Afterward, we walked out into the drizzle, and Lydia asked if I was okay. "I'm fine," I said, and for once it wasn't a lie. She studied me for a second. "Good, because this won't just be about money, it's going to get personal. Are you ready for that?" I looked at her, the rain glinting in her hair under the streetlight. "It already is personal." In the days that followed, the pieces started moving. The fraud report triggered an internal review at the bank. Silver Oak acknowledged receipt of my documents. Lydia began drafting letters to my parents, formal notices requesting cooperation and full disclosure. She warned me that they probably wouldn't respond kindly. "Guilt makes people defensive," she said. "They'll try to make you feel like the problem, not the victim." She was right. When the first letter reached them, my father called within hours. His voice was a mix of anger and disbelief. "You brought a lawyer into this? Do you have any idea what that will do to us?" "Yes," I said simply, "that's the point." He went silent. Then he muttered, "You've changed." "Good," I replied and hung up. Something shifted in me after that. For the first time, I wasn't responding to chaos, I was creating direction. Every action was deliberate, documented, and driven by clarity. I stopped justifying myself. I stopped explaining my feelings. I didn't owe anyone an explanation for wanting my own name back. There was a night that stands out vividly from that period, a small moment that meant everything. I was at home, surrounded by folders, receipts, and post-it notes. My dining table looked like a crime board. I paused, glanced around, and suddenly felt proud. Not because I enjoyed the fight, but because I finally believed I could win it. Lydia called then, her voice brisk as always. "The mortgage company's compliance department has assigned an investigator," she said. "They're going to dig into the original paperwork. If there's fraud, we'll know soon." "Good," I said, exhaling slowly. "You're doing great, Hannah. Keep every document, no matter how small. And remember, this isn't revenge, it's reclamation." After we hung up, I stood by the window and watched the rain streak down the glass. Portland lights shimmered in the distance, blurred and soft. I thought about my parents, not with hatred but with distance. I realized I didn't need an apology anymore. I needed accountability. They could keep their excuses. I would keep my peace. That night, I wrote in my journal, something I hadn't done since my 20s. The words came out steady. They took my name to build something false. I'm taking it back to build something real. The next morning, I woke before dawn, made coffee, and looked at the thick folder on my desk. For the first time since this began, I didn't see it as evidence of destruction. I saw it as the blueprint of recovery. Taking back control didn't happen all at once. It happened in quiet acts of defiance, in each document filed, each truth spoken aloud, each boundary redrawn. And though the storm was far from over, for the first time in months, I could feel the ground beneath me again. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the anger and exhaustion, a new feeling began to take root. Not fear, not even hope, something steadier, something that sounded like my own voice finally answering back to the chaos. Power. The flight to Austin was short, but it felt like the longest few hours of my life. I'd made the decision to go only 2 nights before, after Lydia confirmed that Silver Oak's preliminary review had found serious inconsistencies in the loan file. She said it was time to gather evidence in person, photographs, names, faces. But for me, this wasn't just about evidence anymore. This was about facing the people who had turned my life into paperwork. The plane landed under a cloudless sky, the kind of heat that sticks to your skin. I rented a small gray sedan at the airport, tossed my folder of documents in the passenger seat, and started driving toward the address that had haunted me for months, 412 Lavender Drive. Every mile that passed made my stomach twist tighter. I'd replayed this meeting in my head 1,000 times, imagining every possible version. The tearful apologies, the shouting, the denial, but deep down, I already knew there wouldn't be remorse waiting for me behind that front door. The neighborhood was the kind you see in real estate ads. Manicured lawns, wide driveways, homes painted in shades of quiet wealth. When I turned onto Lavender Drive, my breath caught. The house was beautiful. Modern lines, tall glass windows, a perfectly trimmed hedge. The kind of place you'd never expect to be built on a lie. I parked at the curb and sat there for a moment, watching sunlight bounce off the polished white facade. I thought about everything they'd risked, everything they'd justified. A $523,000 dream built on my credit, my name, my silence. I didn't feel anger then, not exactly. It was something colder, a clarity so sharp it almost hurt. I grabbed the folder and walked up the pathway. The sound of my shoes on the concrete felt too loud, almost intrusive. When I knocked, the door opened quicker than I expected. Evan stood there barefoot, wearing a faded t-shirt and a lazy smile that froze when he saw me. "Hannah," he said, voice thin with surprise. "Wow, didn't expect you here." "I can tell," I said. My tone was calm, even. "We need to talk." He hesitated, looking over his shoulder before stepping aside. "Yeah, okay, come in." The air inside was cool, perfumed with something citrusy. It was the kind of house that photographed well. Neutral tones, oversized mirrors, meaningless art. I noticed the details. The marble countertop, the brand new appliances, the expensive rug under my feet. My name had paid for every inch of it. When I turned, my parents were standing in the hallway. My mother's hand covered her mouth, her eyes wide. My father's expression was unreadable, his posture rigid. The silence stretched between us until I spoke. You could have at least told me you were moving into my house, I said. My father sighed. Hannah, don't start with that tone. This isn't what you think. Really? I opened the folder and spread the papers across their gleaming kitchen island. Because according to this, you forged my signature, used an expired power of attorney, and committed mortgage fraud. That's exactly what I think. My mother stepped forward, voice trembling. Sweetheart, please, we didn't mean for it to get this far. We were helping Evan. Helping? I cut in, my words sharper than I intended. You destroyed my credit. You tied my name to a $500,000 debt. That's not helping. That's theft. Evan's voice cracked in. It's not like we were living it up, Hannah. It's just a house. I needed somewhere to stay, somewhere to start over. You've always been fine. You have your job, your apartment. You stole my future, I said quietly. He blinked. That's dramatic. I stared at him for a long time. The brother I used to defend in every family argument now stood in front of me, arms folded, playing victim. I realized that was the rhythm of our family. My parents enabling, Evan taking, me cleaning up the wreckage. I'm not here for explanations, I said finally. I'm here to tell you what's going to happen next. I pulled out the notarized affidavit Lydia had helped me file, the fraud reports, and the attorney's letterhead. My father's jaw tightened when he saw it. I've already filed an official claim with the mortgage company, I said. They've opened an internal investigation. If you don't refinance this loan under your own names immediately, they'll move forward with legal action. And so will I. My mother's face crumpled. You wouldn't do that to your family. I met her eyes. You did this to your family. For a moment, no one spoke. My father's face turned red, his pride unraveling into anger. You think you're better than us because you have a job and a lawyer friend? You think you can threaten your own parents? I'm not threatening, I said. I'm protecting myself. My voice didn't shake, and that startled him more than anything. He wasn't used to me calm. He was used to me apologizing. Evan shifted uncomfortably, running a hand through his hair. Look, can't we figure this out privately? You don't need to bring lawyers into this. You used a fraudulent document, I said. It's not private anymore. I gathered the papers back into the folder and took a step toward the door. I hadn't planned to say anything else, but something made me turn back. My mother stood there, eyes glassy, wringing her hands. My father glared, refusing to meet my gaze. Evan looked small now, suddenly aware of the weight of what he'd done. I want you all to understand something, I said, my voice soft but steady. I'm not angry because you took my credit. I'm angry because you assumed I wouldn't fight back. You counted on my silence. You counted on me being the good daughter who fixes everything. But that version of me doesn't exist anymore. My father opened his mouth, but I didn't give him the chance to speak. I walked out the door and into the blinding Texas sunlight. The air outside hit me like heat and freedom mixed together. My hands were shaking, but my spine felt straight for the first time in months. As I reached the car, I heard my mother's voice calling my name from the doorway. I didn't turn around. I just opened the door, sat down, and let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. For the first time, the house on Lavender Drive wasn't just a symbol of betrayal. It was proof that I could face them, proof that I could stand my ground. I looked at the folder resting on the passenger seat, its edges worn from handling. Inside it was everything they tried to hide and everything I needed to reclaim my life. When I started the engine, my phone buzzed with a message from Lydia. Remember, Hannah, once you tell the truth out loud, it starts to lose its power over you. I smiled, the kind of smile that comes not from joy but from release. I took one last look at the house, its perfect lawn, its pristine walls, the illusion it represented, and whispered to myself, let it fall. Then I drove away, not knowing exactly what would happen next, but certain of one thing, I wasn't their secret anymore. The week after I left Austin felt strangely silent, like the world was catching its breath after months of chaos. I returned to Portland with the Texas heat still clinging to my skin and the smell of my parents' house still lodged in my memory, a mix of lemon cleaner and guilt. Lydia picked me up from the airport, no questions asked. She just looked at me, nodded once, and said, "You did it." That was the hardest part. But I wasn't sure if she meant the confrontation or what came next, because the days that followed tested every ounce of resolve I had left. Within 48 hours, Lydia submitted the formal fraud claim to Silver Oak Mortgage Servicing, complete with all supporting documentation, my affidavit, proof of forged signatures, the invalid power of attorney, and the financial statements I'd collected. I didn't realize until that moment how much paper my pain had become. Dozens of pages, each one stamped and signed, each one a piece of evidence proving that my family had chosen convenience over conscience. Silver Oak responded faster than we expected. Their compliance department reached out directly, assigning an internal investigator named Alicia West. Her email was professional, measured, but between the lines I could sense the unease. Mortgage companies didn't like the word fraud, especially when it came attached to their own oversight. Alicia requested a video call that Friday. I remember sitting at my kitchen table, nerves buzzing, while Lydia joined from her office. Alicia appeared on screen, wearing a headset, her background blurred but her expression focused. "Miss Brooks," she began, "we've reviewed your claim and the initial documents. At first glance, there are several red flags that warrant a deeper audit. But I want you to understand something. This may take time. We'll need to verify the chain of authorization, the notarization, income documentation, and all third-party involvement." Her tone was careful, neutral, but Lydia didn't let it stay that way. "Miss West," she said, her voice sharp as glass, "my client's name has been used to secure a $500,000 loan without her knowledge or consent. You're not verifying paperwork. You're correcting a crime." Alicia blinked, then nodded. "Understood. We'll begin immediately." For the next 3 weeks, the investigation unfolded like a slow, methodical peeling away of lies. Every few days, I'd receive updates from Lydia, short, factual messages that carried the weight of revelation. The first discovery came from the notary seal. The woman whose stamp appeared on the mortgage documents had left the real estate business 6 years earlier. She now ran a dog rescue in Arizona and provided a sworn statement confirming she hadn't notarized anything since retiring. That was the first crack in the wall. Next came the income verification. The documents claimed I worked for a software engineering firm in Seattle, earning $148,000 a year. Lydia called me the moment she saw it. "Do you have any idea who created this?" she asked. I laughed bitterly. "If I did, we wouldn't be here." She sighed. "It's not even a real company, Hannah. They used a fake letterhead and a disconnected phone number." By the end of the month, Silver Oak's audit had turned into a quiet panic within the company. Alicia called one afternoon, her tone more personal than before. "I shouldn't say this officially," she began, "but whoever submitted this application knew how to make it look clean. It slipped past our verification systems. Your parents must have had help. Someone inside the process who didn't look closely enough." I sat there, stunned. The idea that they hadn't just lied but orchestrated an entire scheme around me was dizzying. "So what happens now?" I asked. "Well," Alicia said carefully, "we've escalated the case to our legal department. We're halting foreclosure proceedings pending the outcome. If fraud is confirmed, we'll remove your name from the loan entirely." I didn't realize I was crying until Lydia said softly, "You're free, Hannah, at least from this part of it." But freedom wasn't simple. The day Silver Oak sent official notice that I was no longer liable, my phone exploded with messages. My mother called 4 times. My father left one voicemail, clipped and furious. "You've humiliated this family." Evan texted, "You didn't have to go nuclear." I deleted them all without listening. Their voices no longer carried authority. They were just noise. Still, silence didn't mean peace. The emotional weight of the investigation lingered in small ways. Some nights I'd wake up gasping, heart racing, certain I'd missed something, that a letter was coming to tell me it had all been reversed. Other nights, I'd reread Lydia's emails just to remind myself that I was believed, that the system, flawed as it was, had chosen my side this time. As the audit expanded, more details surfaced. The bank traced payment records and found that every mortgage payment, until they stopped, had come from my parents' joint account. My name had never appeared on a single transfer. It was all there in black and white, evidence of a scheme built not on desperation, but entitlement. Lydia summarized it best during one of our late-night calls. "They didn't steal because they were struggling," she said. "They did it because they assumed you wouldn't fight back." The turning point came when Silver Oak's internal memo leaked. an accidental forward from Alicia to Lydia that detailed their liability exposure. It acknowledged that their verification process had failed. They knew they'd approved a fraudulent loan. That document changed everything. The bank went from defensive to cooperative overnight. They offered to support my case, even providing witness statements and internal findings for my legal records. When Lydia told me, I just sat there, speechless. So this means... It means, she said with a rare smile, you're no longer the accused, you're the victim. And now they'll want to make it right. In the days that followed, the fallout began for my family. Silver Oak sent formal letters to my parents, demanding resolution. They were given two options: refinance the loan in their own names or face foreclosure under fraud investigation. They had 30 days to decide. Evan called me that weekend. His voice was different this time, no longer cocky, just scared. They're saying they'll take the house, he said. You can fix this, right? You can tell them it was all a misunderstanding? I closed my eyes. It wasn't a misunderstanding, Evan. It was theft. You knew what you were doing. He was silent for a long time before muttering, I thought you'd forgive me. I did, I said quietly, for most of my life. When I hung up, I didn't feel triumph, just a strange kind of calm, like the air after a storm. Weeks later, Lydia and I met at her office to go over the final documentation. The fraud claim was officially closed. My name was cleared. The foreclosure notice listed Daniel and Evan Brooks as the only responsible parties. As I signed the last document, Lydia looked at me and said, You realize what you did, right? You changed the story. They wanted you to disappear into shame, and you didn't. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. That night, walking home through the drizzle, I felt the smallest spark of something I hadn't felt in months. Relief, yes, but also pride. It wasn't loud or cinematic. It was quiet, like the steady rhythm of footsteps after too long standing still. The investigation had taken my pain and turned it into evidence, my silence, and turned it into testimony. And in doing so, it gave me something I didn't even know I'd lost, the belief that I could rebuild, not just my credit, but myself. The hearing was scheduled for a Friday morning in late March, the kind of cold, gray Portland morning that matched the weight in my chest. By then, I'd spent months wading through evidence, phone calls, and the slow machinery of justice. Lydia had warned me that this day would feel strange, not like victory, but like the end of something I hadn't realized I was still holding on to. She was right. Closure isn't fireworks. It's a quiet, steady exhale after you've been holding your breath for too long. The courtroom in Travis County was smaller than I'd imagined. There was no grand wood paneling, no echo of drama like on television, just rows of stiff benches, a judge who looked like he'd seen every possible version of human disappointment, and the low murmur of people waiting for their turn at judgment. Lydia sat beside me, calm and unflappable, her files stacked neatly in front of her. I tried to mirror her composure, but my hands wouldn't stop trembling. Across the aisle sat my parents and Evan. Seeing them there felt surreal, like watching strangers wear my family's faces. My mother clutched her purse like it was a lifeline, her eyes darting anywhere but toward me. My father sat rigid, his expression hard and unreadable. Evan looked lost, smaller somehow, as if the reality of what he'd done was finally catching up to him. When the judge called our case, the sound of my name echoing through the room sent a shiver down my spine. Brooks versus Silver Oak Mortgage Servicing, regarding fraudulent loan liability. I never imagined I'd hear my name in a courtroom sentence like that. The bank's attorney went first, a woman in her 40s named Vanessa Clark. She spoke with practiced precision, laying out the facts like stepping stones. A loan taken under false pretenses, a power of attorney used beyond its scope, income statements fabricated, payments made by unauthorized parties. It was clinical, impersonal, but beneath her words was the truth I'd lived for over a year. When it was Lydia's turn, she stood slowly, smoothed her jacket, and looked directly at the judge. Your Honor, this case is not about negligence or confusion. It is about betrayal. My client, Miss Hannah Brooks, had her identity stolen not by strangers, but by her own family. The defendants abused an outdated legal document, forged signatures, and jeopardized her financial future for personal gain. We are not here to destroy a family. We are here to affirm that family does not place anyone above the law. Her voice didn't waver once. Every sentence landed like a hammer. I could feel the room shift, the energy tightening as she handed over the files, copies of my affidavit, the notary statement, bank transaction records, and Silver Oak's internal audit results. When the judge took the folder, the weight of it looked almost physical in his hands. Then came the part I'd been dreading. My father took the stand. He spoke in measured tones, trying to sound composed, but the cracks showed. He admitted to using the power of attorney, insisted he thought it was still valid, that he was just helping his son. He never once said my name. To him, I wasn't a daughter wronged. I was an obstacle in his plan. Lydia's cross-examination was surgical. "Mr. Brooks," she began, "did you at any point notify your daughter that her name was being used on a $523,000 loan?" "No," he said. "Did you believe she was aware of the property at 412 Lavender Drive?" "No." "Did she give verbal or written consent?" His jaw tightened. "No." "Then, Mr. Brooks, can you explain how using an outdated power of attorney from her teenage years for a property purchase qualifies as anything but fraud?" For the first time, he looked unsure. "I did what I thought was best for the family." "Not for your daughter," Lydia said quietly and sat down. Evan went next. His testimony was worse because it was so painfully familiar, excuses wrapped in self-pity. "I didn't know it would turn into this," he said. "I thought it was under Dad's name. I thought Hannah knew." Lydia didn't even stand this time. She just looked at him and said, "You never asked her, did you?" He hesitated. "No." The judge didn't need more. When it was over, the courtroom fell into a heavy silence. The judge adjusted his glasses, flipped through the paperwork, and then spoke in that calm, bureaucratic tone that somehow carried more power than any shouting could. "Based on the evidence presented, it is clear that Ms. Brooks' identity was used without her knowledge or consent. The court releases her from all financial liability associated with the mortgage at 412 Lavender Drive. Silver Oak may proceed with foreclosure against the co-signers, Daniel and Evan Brooks, who are found jointly responsible for the debt." I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. The words hung in the air, and for a moment, I thought I'd imagined them. Then Lydia's hand touched my arm. "You're free, Hannah," she whispered. My mother began to cry softly, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. My father just sat there, staring at the judge like he couldn't comprehend what had happened. Evan slumped in his chair, defeated. When the judge adjourned the session, I stood slowly. My legs felt weak but grounded. As I gathered my things, I turned and looked at them one last time. My father's expression was a mixture of anger and something else, wounded pride maybe. My mother mouthed, "Please, let's talk." Evan avoided my gaze completely. Outside, the air was crisp and clean, the kind of air that feels like the first deep breath after being underwater too long. Lydia walked beside me in silence until we reached the courthouse steps. My parents were a few yards behind, their voices low. My father called out, "You didn't have to do this, Hannah. You've humiliated us." I turned to him. "No, Dad, you humiliated yourselves. I just told the truth." He flinched, not from volume. I hadn't raised my voice, but from the finality in my tone. My mother stepped forward, tears streaking her face. "We're still your parents. We made mistakes, but—" I cut her off gently. "I know, and I'll always wish things were different, but I can't carry your choices anymore." Evan said nothing. He just watched me, guilt written across his face, but I didn't feel the old pull to comfort him. That part of me was gone. When I finally walked away, I didn't look back. Lydia and I reached her car, and before getting in, she said, "I've worked a lot of cases, Hannah. Most people never see justice this clean. You did more than clear your name. You set a precedent." I nodded, still absorbing it. "It doesn't feel like winning." "It's not supposed to," she said softly. "It's supposed to feel like balance being restored." That night, I went home and sat in the dark with a glass of wine, listening to the hum of the city outside. It wasn't joy I felt. It was something quieter, steadier. The weight that had lived on my chest for months was finally gone, replaced by a calm I didn't recognize. I opened my laptop and read the court's official ruling again, line by line. Each word confirmed what I already knew. I wasn't powerless anymore. The house, the debt, the lies, they no longer belonged to me. They belonged to the people who built them. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt free, not just from the mortgage, but from the version of myself that thought she had to keep forgiving. It's strange how silence can feel like a reward. For months after the courtroom hearing, my life went quiet in a way it hadn't been in years. No phone calls, no guilt-laced messages from my mother, no new crises erupting from a family that once lived in constant emotional traffic. Just stillness. For the first time since I could remember, the only voice I heard was my own. The first few weeks after the ruling felt almost unreal. Lydia handled the closing paperwork with her usual precision, ensuring every trace of my name was wiped from that mortgage. Silver Oak's legal team issued a formal apology for their oversight, a letter I folded neatly into a small safe box with the rest of my documents. The judge's signature on that release order was the quiet punctuation mark to a year-long sentence I hadn't deserved. But even with the legal victory, there were days when I felt hollow, as if something inside me had been surgically removed. I realized that what I'd lost wasn't just trust, it was the illusion of belonging. Then one morning, as I watered the few plants on my balcony, I decided I didn't want to live with emptiness as my only souvenir. I wanted something to grow again, even if it started small. So I did what Lydia called a practical kind of healing. I made a list of what I could control: my credit repair, my savings, my next home. It wasn't glamorous, but it was grounding. I took a portion of the settlement money and paid off lingering debts that had nothing to do with the mortgage, but had weighed on me all the same. Student loans, medical bills, the quiet burdens of middle adulthood. Then I made a donation to a nonprofit that supported victims of financial abuse. It felt right to redirect something born of deception into something honest. When I received a thank you letter from the organization, it was the first time in months that I smiled without forcing it. Lydia and I stayed in touch, though less frequently. She liked to tease me that I'd missed my calling as an investigator. "You could start a consulting business for people who've been defrauded by their families," she said once over coffee. I laughed, but there was a truth in her words I couldn't ignore. I'd learned how common my story was. After I'd posted a brief, anonymous version of it online, names changed, details blurred, the comments flooded in. Hundreds of strangers, many of them older women, shared their own stories of betrayal, stolen inheritances, fraudulent loans, emotional manipulation disguised as love. I wasn't unique. I was part of a quiet army of people learning to say no after a lifetime of yes. The post went viral in a modest way. People thanked me for giving words to what they hadn't been able to describe. A financial counselor even reached out, asking if I'd be willing to speak at a small workshop for women rebuilding their financial independence after family exploitation. I hesitated at first, but then I remembered what Lydia had told me the day I won the case. Your story doesn't lose power when you share it. It multiplies. The workshop was held in a library basement, nothing fancy, just a circle of women and a pot of overbrewed coffee. When I stood in front of them and said, "My parents took out a $523,000 mortgage in my name, and I didn't find out until it almost ruined me," I expected pity. What I saw instead were nods, recognition, quiet strength. Some of them cried. One woman reached for my hand afterward and said, "You make me feel like I can start over too." That was the moment I realized that redemption wasn't about forgiveness. It was about purpose. As months passed, I began to rebuild more than my finances. I rebuilt my sense of home. I started looking for a place to buy again, not out of defiance, but as a declaration of self-trust. The search took longer than I expected. Every house I toured reminded me, in some small way, of what had been stolen. White picket fences that looked like lies, family photos staged in hallways that felt like propaganda. But then I found a modest 2-bedroom cottage in Bend, Oregon, nestled near a line of evergreens with a wide porch that caught the afternoon sun. The realtor showed me the backyard garden and said, "It needs a little love, but it's got good bones." So did I. The day I signed the deed, I sat alone in the empty living room, the keys warm in my palm. The air smelled of dust and pine. There were no congratulations from family, no photos sent to a group chat, no mother's voice telling me how proud she was. But there was something better. Peace. I didn't need an audience to validate that I'd made it through. I had my own reflection, calm and unrecognizable in the best way. Every morning since, I start the day the same way. Coffee brewing, sunlight pouring through the kitchen window, music low in the background. I water the plants, open the back door, and let the air move through the house like forgiveness I no longer need to chase. Sometimes in the quiet, I think about my family. Not with anger, not even with sadness, but with distance. My mother sent one final email after the court case, apologizing for everything that happened. The phrasing was soft, evasive, designed to sound like regret without truly saying we were wrong. I didn't reply. Lydia told me I didn't have to. Closure, she said, isn't a conversation. It's a decision. That decision has shaped everything since. I changed my phone number. I closed the old family email chain that had lingered like a ghost in my inbox. I opened new accounts, new passwords, new routines. Bit by bit, the version of Hannah who existed before all this began faded into memory, replaced by someone steadier, sharper, unafraid. It's been nearly a year now. My credit score is climbing, my plants are thriving. And last month, I finally hung the framed letter from Silver Oak in my hallway. Not because I'm proud of what they did, but because it reminds me of what I survived. Beneath it, I pinned a small card with a handwritten quote I found somewhere along the way. Peace is not the absence of pain, it's the ownership of your story. Sometimes, when I think about that phrase, I realize that the story isn't really about my parents anymore. It's about the moment I chose to stop living as someone else's collateral. Every so often, I take evening walks around my neighborhood. The streetlights glow softly, the scent of cedar drifting through the air. I pass other homes, other families, people laughing inside their warm lit rooms, and for the first time, I don't feel envy or grief. I feel gratitude that my home, my name, my life belong to me alone. I still have scars from it all, financial, emotional, invisible, but they no longer feel like reminders of what was taken. They feel like proof of what I reclaimed. I once thought redemption meant making peace with those who hurt you. Now I know it means making peace with yourself despite them. And as I lock the door each night, hearing the quiet click that separates the world from the space I've built, I whisper the same simple truth that carried me through everything. I didn't just rebuild my credit, I rebuilt myself. When I look back at everything that happened, the phone call that shattered an ordinary Tuesday, the discovery of betrayal, the months spent fighting for my name, and the quiet victory that came with freedom, it feels like I lived a lifetime inside one story. Hannah Brooks began as a woman who trusted too easily, who believed that family was the safest place to stand. But through deception and loss, she discovered a harder, more necessary truth. That love without respect becomes manipulation, and forgiveness without accountability becomes surrender. Her journey from victim to survivor wasn't about revenge. It was about reclamation of her credit, her dignity, her boundaries, and her peace. What she built at the end wasn't just a new home. It was a new sense of self, one that no document or signature could ever take away again. The lesson buried in this story is one many of us need to hear, especially in a world that often glorifies sacrifice as love. Protecting your peace is not cruelty, it's courage. Family loyalty should never come at the cost of self-respect. Setting boundaries doesn't make you unkind, it makes you whole. If someone takes advantage of your kindness, remember that reclaiming your power doesn't mean closing your heart. It means deciding who deserves access to it. You don't have to wait for an apology to begin healing. Sometimes, walking away is the apology you give yourself. Now, let me ask you something. If someone you loved betrayed your trust the way Hannah's family did, what would you do first? A. Confront them directly and demand answers. B. Step back, protect yourself, and gather evidence before reacting. Type A or B in the comments below. I'd love to know what your instinct would be. And tell me, what's your takeaway from Hannah's story? Do you believe forgiveness is necessary for peace, or can peace exist without it? Share your thoughts in the comments so we can learn from each other. If you enjoyed this story and want more powerful real-life dramas like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps these stories alive and gives me the motivation to keep creating meaningful content for you.